it seems self-evident from my perspective. If you spend enough decades studying enough different ways in which our brain and behavior are influenced by stuff we had no control over, that put all those pieces together, and free will is just what we call the biology that hasn't been discovered yet.
So you think that as we understand more and more about the biology, the idea of some room left for human free will just go away?
Yeah, basically, because if you look at, I don't know, the last 500 years of knowledge, that's been a theme over and over.
Hmm.
And in some ways, the last half millennium, what biology and behavior has mostly consisted of is people saying, oh, I had no idea that had something to do with why that behavior happens. And what has occurred in the process is if there is free will, it's getting crammed into smaller and smaller places. But in substantive ways, all that science has spent centuries doing is teaching us, oh, that's actually a biological phenomenon. That's actually stuff out of our control. That's actually stuff that was sculpted by issues that were sheer histories of luck or bad luck. All we are is the sum, nothing more or less, of what our biology and its interactions with environment have been. I don't believe there's a shred of agency that goes into any of our behavior. So that puts me like out of the lunatic fringe of the range of philosophers and neuroscientists thinking about this. But in terms of this stuff, where this issue of there's more stuff going on than we think, subterranean biological forces, ooh, I had no idea that had anything to do with it, it's out of your control. The realm where it is most important is when it comes to behaviors that we judged harshly, that
Hmm.
we punish people for, that we condemn people for. And the lesson that I like pound into the heads of my students over and over is 500 years ago, in virtually every European country, if you had an epileptic seizure, the best doctors around had a diagnosis for you as to what caused the seizure. And the seizure was caused because you were consorting with Satan.
Hmm.
And they had an absolutely clear neurological intervention, which is to burn you at the stake. And somewhere along the way, people learned, oh, no, it's actually a disease. And somewhere along the way, they stopped putting people with epilepsy in psychiatric hospitals. And somewhere along the way, people started developing laws that distinguished between who a person is and what a seizure might do to them in terms of the ability to drive only once the meds have kept you seizure free for a certain length of time. You sit somebody down today and say, wow, can you imagine somebody having a seizure and you saying, yeah, that's because you're sleeping with Beelzebub? They'll say, oh my God, that's ridiculous. Wow, people used to believe that. People are going to look back on how we think of people with bad self-control,
Hmm.
people with an inability to feel somebody else's problems, people who are remorseless, people who are cold-blooded, this or that. And it's going to be as misplaced of attribution that we have now when saying these are attributes that are deserving of punishment as people saying that epileptics were consorting with Satan. If you accept that we are nothing more or less than our biology, incredibly complicated biology from 1 second ago to 1 million years ago and interacting with environment, blah, 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 if we are nothing more or less than our biology, and those are biological influences over which we had no control that brought us to this point. If you really, really, really believe that, you could never feel justified in thinking you are entitled to anything more than anyone else, because whatever it is that you have done, which you believe has earned you praise or entitlement, you had nothing to do with. And if you really, really believe this stuff, you have no rational grounds for ever hating anyone, because they didn't have a damn thing to do with whatever it is they did, no matter how horrific and hurtful it was. And if you really think those ways, this could be a very different world. And at the same time, like I can think those ways for about 3.5 seconds at a time before I fall back into the much more ingrained stuff. But if you really believe this stuff, those are the only conclusions you can reach.